Hello again, everyone. Witch Doctor here, looking at the markets, and I'm looking at last week's activity, talking about the 2-week activity here, week over week, and basically a little bit of a wrap. As you can see here, looking at the dollar index futures on a 4-hour chart, and of course compared to the yen, Swiss yen, Canadian. Along the top, you got the euro, pound, and Australian dollar across the bottom. Remember, they're all basically on a 4-hour chart, and this is to illustrate what has happened, transpired over the last 2 weeks. And essentially what we're doing is comparing this previous week as to the week before. So you can see here the red lines. Look at the dollar index. You got the period separators, separating this week from last week, and obviously not able to get anywhere near the previous week's high here. You can see that 83.98 was the high, and the market really traded lower throughout the whole entire week. And it looked like even that the dollar was going to take out last week's low and then continue in that direction, obviously pushing below the 83.10 level as low as 82.80. But literally towards the end of the week, the back half of the week, you can see how the market basically rallied very aggressively on the dollar. And this is what I was talking about last week. You can go back to my last week's the weekly market wrap from last week, and you can see here this is what I was talking about. Get a little bit of weakness in the dollar index, show some selling here, and then on Friday towards the back end of the week you see the market basically rallied, taking out everybody who was short. Not able to stay down below the previous week's low, having a lot of trouble trading below that level, and then sure enough on Friday you get a lot of short covering rally. The yen here pushing down below the previous week's low very nicely, holding right around 79.17 I guess was the previous week's close, and it was basically a sell-off for the rest of the week, finishing on the close somewhere on 78.42. This turned out to be a pretty decent trade, even though it really only turned out to be something like 50 pips that evolved over the course of the week, but at least you can see here that 78.80 was the last little bit of resistance that came in the market, pushing it as low as 78.42. But you can see here that breaking below the previous week's low, similar to what we look at on the intraday basis, breaking above or below the previous session high. You can see here basically pushing below last week's low, coming back up to it, using it as resistance, and then pushing off of this to the downside. Swiss franc, of course, choppy sideways activity here throughout the week, not able to break out of the previous week's trading range. And then right around Friday, you can see here the nice little burst of energy towards the previous week's high, and then ultimately trying to break through this level. Canadian dollar, which is interesting, where the Swiss franc was really sideways for a majority of the week, you can see that the Canadian dollar was getting pushed lower, ultimately pushing as deep as 1.00, right around the big figure here, before actually finding the buyers coming in towards Friday, pushing all the way back up to 101.38, closing right around the previous week's low. And now the question is whether or not we're going to continue to move lower, or if we're going to actually go the way of the Swiss franc and the dollar index, where the strength here that was shown on Friday will lead to a little bit more strength into the beginning of the week. We'll talk about that in a moment. The euro, of course, a little choppy sideways. You can see here on the 4-hour chart, really not able to get outside the previous week's trading range, and of course using the previous week's high as resistance. And then of course on Friday, Thursday and Friday, just getting a nice bit of selling here, finishing on the lows 121.50 or so, right at the previous week's low. Now it looks like we're going to actually continue lower, but it's still too early to tell. It's just that's probably what we're going to have to expect. The problem though is that this, you can see here the pound basically able to push outside of yesterday's or last week's trading range. You can see the break above last week's high here, and then the retest down to test the support. Sure enough, working out twice, and then pushing 56 after reaching 56.05 all the way up to 57 and change. Very nice trade here in the pound. You can see this upward channel that did fail coming in on Friday, and the market basically broke down. So kind of curious about this, but the euro went sideways. You can see really nothing too exciting here. The pound tried to move up, and we got failure here. And the Australian dollar is really the winner. You can see here that we broke out of last week's high, tried to do it twice, and then finally used it as support closer to the middle of the week, and then was off to the races, pushing up to the 104 and change level before sliding back towards Friday, the close of the week. Now the question here is how this market wants to continue to develop, if we're going to be able to reach up into the 104 level, or if we're going to start to fall back in the Australian dollar. As for now, watching around, the way that this shows is that we had sideways consolidation in the euro, slight to moderate bullishness in the pound, and it looks like decent bullishness in the Australian dollar. But this is a conflict of confirmation. In other words, not a lot of confirmation. Same thing with the Swiss franc going sideways, while the Canadian dollar went down, leads to the dollar index having trouble pushing in one direction or another. So that's all I got for this market wrap. Looking for the dollar to probably show a little bit of strength early on this week, and then we'll have to see what happens going into the back end of the week. Good luck in your trading. We'll see you at the next market wrap.